Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Ann Ziola, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Engagement at Doane University. And our goals in the Doane Alumni Office are always to educate, engage, and empower our alumni. And so we are so excited that you have decided to join us for the webinar today in our brand new professional and personal development program called Lifelong Tigers. This webinar will be recorded and shared on our webpage, and we are also live on Facebook today. So hello to everybody that is joining us on social media. Today, the Doane Alumni Association is hosting Navigating the Home Buying Process, and that's being presented by LaDawn, Capek, Sperling from the class of 1994. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you are joining us through Zoom and you have any issues with connectivity, problems hearing, be sure and leave us a message in our chat box, and you can find that icon at the very bottom. And our Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement, Mike Stellick, will be there to help you with those items. You can also chat with each other in the chat box, and I know LaDawn has some really great discussion questions and some poll questions coming up. So if you have any questions for LaDawn during the presentation, please be sure and just type them into that Q&A, that question and answer box located at the bottom in the Zoom toolbar. And we'll have time throughout the presentation and at the end to answer those questions. And we'll try to get to as many as we can. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you LaDawn Sperling. LaDawn is a 1994 graduate of Doane, and she worked 20 years in corporate communications before transitioning to a career in real estate, where the education she received at Doane continues to serve her well. LaDawn is licensed in Colorado and affiliated with Coldwell Banker, where she was recently recognized as the #1 agent in her office and the #8 agent for Coldwell Banker in Colorado. So LaDawn, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Ann. So we're going to start with a poll. I'd like to know where you are in the home buying process. Are you currently renting but would like to buy a home? Are you in the process of buying a home now, or do you already own a home?
Okay, so we're going to launch the polling here, and you should be able to see that on your computer now. We'll go ahead and give you 10 seconds or so to choose where you're currently at in the home buying process, and then we'll end the polling. So currently renting, in the process of buying a new home now, or you already own a home. Well, LaDawn, I think it's pretty overwhelmingly, looks like a lot of people joining us that are thinking of buying a home. They might be renting now, but looking down the road for the future. So hopefully that'll help you tailor some of the things you're talking about today.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Ann. Oops, I have to get rid of the poll. There we go. Okay. Just trying to get my slide to advance. There we go. So a little bit about me. As Ann mentioned, I'm licensed in the state of Colorado. So this presentation will be pretty general because I'm not allowed to advise you on your particular state, since Colorado is the only state where I have a license. So it'll be kind of a big picture overview of the home buying process. I've lived in Lakewood, Colorado since 2005. We relocated here for my husband's job. My husband and I are both Nebraska natives. We live with our 3 cats, Elvis, Mari, and Teddy. Elvis is the one I'm holding, Teddy's the one on the perch, and Mari is the one who's drunk on catnip. And then giving back to the community is something that's really important to me, and I spend a lot of time doing that. I'm on the board of directors of the Action Center, which is a nonprofit that helps those in need in Jefferson County. And then also Spay Today, which is a nonprofit that provides low-cost spay and neuter surgeries to make it more affordable to adopt pets. And then at the beginning of this year, Governor Jared Polis appointed me to the Colorado Housing Board. So that's a board of 7 people. I represent Congressional District 7, and we decide how the state's money that goes towards affordable housing projects is allocated. I graduated from Doane University with a degree in corporate communications, and then I received my master's degree from the University of Denver in marketing and PR. And then Anne mentioned my rankings in our office and Coldwell Banker, Colorado. So my personal mission is to make good things happen for good people. And when I transitioned out of the corporate world, I quit my job without having another job. I just got fed up and just gave them 3 weeks notice, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I met with a career counselor who told me, oh, you really like helping people, so you should work for a nonprofit. Well, I'm involved in a lot of nonprofits, and I knew that that wasn't something that I could probably do day in, day out. And so was really looking for something to do. And a friend of mine who sells real estate in Nebraska suggested real estate. And the first day of real estate school, our instructor said, a lot of people go into real estate because they've heard you can make good money. They like looking at houses. He's like, but you really need to go into real estate because you like helping people. And so I was like, wow, this is totally what I need. This is what I need to do. So some of my values, I want my clients to have awesome results. When I was in the corporate world, I did a lot on change management and change communication. So I try to help my clients work through that change of moving, because a lot of times people are moving because of a divorce or a death or some sort of bigger change that's happened in their life. I worked in mining for 5 years, so safety isn't just a priority for me, it's a value, and I make sure that I'm doing what I can to keep my clients safe. Community builder, one step, one action, one home at a time. I'm working on building our communities and making them better places. And then serious fun. I try to make you finding your next home a fun process. So every year, the National Association of Realtors does a survey of home buyers and sellers. And here's what they found about home buyers. 33% of the home buyers in 2000, these would be the results from 2018. They were, so the 2019 survey, but people who bought houses in 2018, 33% of them were first-time home buyers, which wasn't a change from the previous survey. 24% had student debt. The household income is the household income of everybody who bought houses. So these are people who are selling a house and buying a house. So these aren't just the first-time home buyers. Half of them are buying in a suburban area, and 12% is the median down payment. So a lot of people think that you need 20% down, but that is not the case. And 89% purchase their home through a real estate agent or broker. So some of their survey results for aspiring buyers were that of those surveyed, of the non-owners, 74% were currently renters and 26% were living with someone else without paying housing costs. But of those, 78% believe that homeownership is a good financial decision. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we know that real estate is a great way to build wealth. And I personally bought my first home when I was 30. And I really wish that I hadn't waited so long, because I see my clients who are in their 20s buying homes and they're building equity, and then they're buying the next home, and they keep that equity building. And I wish I hadn't waited so long personally. So this is an overview of the home buying process. So up here at the top, the first thing you should do is meet with a real estate professional, and we'll talk a little bit about how you hire a real estate professional. But one advantage buyers have is, in most states, the agent's commission is paid by the seller. So you will pay virtually nothing to have an agent representing you. The next step is to get pre-approved. So you don't want to start shopping until you get pre-approved and talk to a lender, and it's likely that your real estate professional will have some great contacts for you for lenders. Then you start the fun part, which is searching for homes. So you need to know, there's lots of different websites that you can use to search for homes, but the multiple listing service, or MLS, is where realtors input all of our new listings. And then those listings feed out to all of the other websites like Zillow and Trulia and everything else that's out there. So in Colorado, the website that's connected to the multiple listing service is recolorado.com. And so that is the website that will have the new listings the fastest, because it instantly shows up when I hit active on my listings. It's instantly there. And it takes a bit, like maybe several hours. It used to take several days sometimes to get it to all of those other websites. So that's one thing, is you want to make sure that you're using the best website possible to search for homes. And with all of the tools that we have, that you can search for homes, it's quite likely that you'll find your home yourself right there on the internet. Like, I have clients texting me all day long telling me, hey, what about this one? And it's quite likely. And really the area where your real estate representative adds the most value is in negotiating the offer and the whole strategy behind getting your offer accepted. So then the next step is make an offer. If you're in a market like we are in the Denver metro area, you may make several offers before you get accepted. Then you negotiate and go under contract. And it's important to remember that your contract is a legal document with the seller. So you need to make sure that you've gone through that contract thoroughly with your realtor, and you know exactly what you're signing and you know exactly what you're committing to. Once you have a signed agreement, you're in escrow or under contract. And that means that you and the seller have agreed to the price and the terms, and the home is held for you until closing. So then you get into all of the final details. And a lot of those final details are with your lender. There's also the appraisal, and then there's the inspection. So inspection, I know Anne brought up some things that they had as a personal experience with inspection, but inspectors vary from state to state quite a bit. So in Colorado, inspectors are not licensed. In some states, inspectors are licensed, and it really varies the level of detail that inspectors do. So it's likely your agent might be able to refer someone to you. In some states, agents aren't allowed to do that. But when hiring an inspector, don't be afraid to ask the inspector for a copy of their report. Because if you get a copy of one of their past reports, you can look through that and see how detailed are they. Do they check the windows? Do they check the outlets? Or is it more of a bigger, higher level overview at just the major systems in the structure? Then finally, you get to closing, and this is the transfer of funds and ownership. Either a title company or an attorney will probably act as the third party to facilitate the closing, depending on which state you're in. In Colorado, there aren't attorneys typically involved in real estate transactions, so we'll be working with a title company through that process. And then you are a new homeowner. That all makes it sound really easy, doesn't it? But we found that there are challenges with every real estate transaction, but you'll have a team who will work with you to get through any challenge that you come up with during your transaction. So your typical team on your real estate transaction, first is your realtor. And I have an assistant, and I also have a transaction manager. So my clients sometimes are interacting with them. My assistant, Dion, sets up all of the inspections. My transaction manager, Brittany, once someone goes under contract, she's involved making sure we get all of the paperwork in place that we need to have in place, that all of the signatures happen, and that we don't miss any dates and deadlines. Buying a house is really dates and deadline intensive, and you don't want to miss those dates and deadlines. So Brittany makes sure that we are on track and not missing any of those. Then you'll have your lender, and it's very likely the lender will have a team working with them as well, like a loan officer, a loan assistant. The lender will have an underwriting department that makes sure that they can do your loan. You'll have your inspector. An appraiser will come out and make sure that the house is not, that you're not paying too much for the house. And then you'll have, as we mentioned, title and or attorney. So one of the first things I ask my clients when I sit down with them is, let's think about the logistics. So we talk about what's more important to you, price, timing, or convenience, because those different things really will decide what our strategy is. If you're selling a house and buying a house, convenience and timing might be more important than price. But if you're in an apartment and you have a month-to-month lease, or you're living with family, even better yet, price might be more important to you than timing. So look at when you need to move. In Colorado, once you go under contract, we can get that closing done in 30 days with your loan. So when I sit down with my clients, we look at when's your lease ending, and we say, okay, we need to be under contract by this date at the latest, just in case something doesn't work out with this house and we have to go to another house. And we walk all of that backwards, because the last thing I want is for one of my clients to end up homeless, right? So, and then the other question I ask is, if you saw the right house today, are you ready to buy today? Because if it's someone who says, oh, I'm not really going to be ready to buy in 3 months, all of those houses that are out there right now in the Denver Metro MLS, all of those are going to be under contract, sold, gone in 3 months. So we really need to make sure that you're starting at the right time, because you don't want to see a great house and not be able to write an offer on it because the timing isn't right for you. So some things to consider when you're thinking about buying a home are neighborhoods. What type of neighborhood do you like? And tying right into that is lifestyle. Do you want to be able to walk to different things? Your commute plays a huge part. If you like taking public transportation, where's the access to public transportation? You might want to look at the schools in the neighborhood. If you like a certain type of home design or construction, that might limit you to which types of areas you look in. So in Colorado, if you're a first-time home buyer and you want a new build and you want to be under $400,000, you pretty much need to look in Aurora or Brighton in that direction in order to get a new build at that price point. And then you should also look at resale value. So as I'm showing homes, I'm pointing out to my clients different things that might impact resale. Now that might be something that you don't care about. So for example, I was showing some clients a house, and it had these gorgeous views of the mountains, and it backed to train tracks. And that was part of the reason the house didn't sell. Like, the train tracks were down below, so they weren't right there, but you would get train noise at that house. And I pointed that out to my clients, and they said, we don't care about the train noise. We can live with train noise. They said, but we will have these mountain views forever, which in Colorado, you can never guarantee that you keep your mountain views. But the train tracks, it's really hard to move train tracks. The railroads do not take kindly to having their tracks moved. So they felt like their mountain views were very protected by having that train behind them, and they were okay that it would limit their buyer pool if they ever decided to sell their home. So you need to consider, is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market? So if it's a buyer's market, there's many houses for sale, and houses are staying on the market a little bit longer. You can probably go look at the house 2 or 3 times before writing an offer, and you might even be able to write an offer at a lower price and ask for better terms for you. I've had my license for 6 years, and I have never worked in a buyer's market, so I have no idea what that's like. But I think there are some states that they are having a buyer's market right now. Here in Colorado, for a while, at $1 million and up, it was a buyer's market, but even that is still a seller's market right now. So if you're in a seller's market, there's fewer houses for sale, and homes sell quickly. So if you see one you like, you need to get into it the first day you can get into it, and you'll probably only be able to look at it once, and you need to get your offer ready quickly. And you're often offering a higher price, and the seller dictates the terms. So I have a listing that just went on the market on Sunday, and we have 9 offers that I'm going through with my seller today. And every buyer's agent called me and said, what does your seller need? And we chose the closing date. We said that they needed it for 30 days after closing, rent-free. We dictated all of those terms in the contract. So when I sit down with my sellers, they're going to be like, this is so amazing. This is exactly what we need. And so when you're a buyer in a seller's market, you need to be flexible and have that flexibility. And you might be offering a price on a house that you've seen for 30 minutes, and you do need to make quick decisions.
LaDawn, we've had a couple of questions come through, so
Perfect.
if you don't mind taking a pause for just a couple of seconds, I thought you might want to answer some of these.
I'm happy to do that. Are you going to read them, or do I need to go to the Q&A?
Nope, I can read them right to you. Perfect. Here. Somebody asked, is it possible to get inspections done earlier in the process, especially before contracts?
So in Colorado, definitely not, because you just don't have access to the home to do an inspection prior to making an offer. I'm not sure what it's like in other states. I'm sure if it were a buyer's market, you probably could, because you'd probably be able to get that scheduled. But here, like, my inspector's a week out. Well, that house is going to be under contract and gone by that time. So definitely when there's a buyer's market, you do see more sellers doing pre-inspections and making that available to buyers, but we're really not seeing that much in the Denver metro area.
Sure, sure. And do realtors typically have a good idea of the cultures of different neighborhoods? Like, I know you're in Colorado, and so many different areas have different cultures. So do realtors have a good feel of that?
So because of fair housing laws, we cannot be seen as steering people to particular neighborhoods. So we can give you the overall amenities of a neighborhood, but we can't really talk about how a neighborhood is culturally. Like, I even had a family that lived in a very suburban area who mentioned to me that they wanted to move to a neighborhood with more diversity because they had adopted African-American children and they wanted to be in a neighborhood with more diversity. That's even violating fair housing for me to steer them to a neighborhood, even though they're asking for that neighborhood. So we, as realtors, we have to be very careful to not violate fair housing laws.
That's really great to know. Somebody mentioned, and we've talked about this earlier, LaDawn, when we got together, that, you know, Colorado is referenced a lot so far, and are all of these steps the same in Nebraska as they are in Colorado?
So I've purchased a house in Nebraska, and definitely the home buying process in Nebraska is very similar to the home buying process here. And I've purchased 2 houses in Nebraska and sold one, and there weren't attorneys involved in either of those sales. All of them, the closing happened at a title company.
Right. And so some of the things are probably similar to what we see in Colorado, but there's also unique and distinct things for every state that you would really have to talk to your realtor about.
Yeah, you would really want to talk to your realtor. And definitely the way we list homes in Colorado is very different. So a lot of times we list the home and we keep it on the market for a few days to try to get as many offers as we can and get the price up as high as it can. And when I talk to my Nebraska friends who are realtors, it seems like they consider every offer as it's received. So you don't have the frenzy that we build up in the Denver metro area. Because my agent in Nebraska, she's like, what? You're doing what? You're making people go through the whole weekend and you're collecting all these offers? And I'm like, yeah, one time I had 30 offers on a house. And she's like, no, that's rude. You need to respond to them.
That does sound like Nebraska nice, doesn't it?
It does sound like Nebraska nice. And I'm like, really? I'm like, you get an offer and then the seller looks at it and evaluates it and doesn't even try to create the frenzy? She's like, no, we don't do that.
Well, I appreciate you giving us kind of a general overview of the home buying process and then some of those specific things that might be pertinent to the state that you're in. Somebody else, Lindsay, who's joining us today, thank you, Lindsay, is asking, what are the benefits of providing a 20% down payment? What happens if you can't afford a 20% down payment?
Yeah, so one of the big myths of real estate is that you need 20% down, and you do not need 20% down. There are a lot of products that are 3% down for a conventional loan. So really, if you have 3% down right now with a first-time home buyer, that is a really solid amount and a solid buyer. You will need additional money for your closing costs and things like that, but you should not feel like you need to wait until you have a full 20% down. In fact, one of my clients, she's a teacher and she had saved and saved and saved and had 20% down, and her interest rate was actually higher having 20% down than it was having less, because she wasn't paying the private mortgage insurance that the lender feels like is backing that mortgage. So she actually ended up not putting 20% down. She decreased her down payment to get the lower interest rate. So when you have hire a lender who will really look through your numbers with you and take the time to figure out what's the right amount of down payment for you. Because with interest rates as low as they are right now, a lot of my buyers, even if they have 20% down, are deciding that they might as well borrow more money at a low interest rate and use their cash for something else.
Got it. Got it. Well, and we did have another question come up in the chat that, you know, in some cases, closing costs may be more on the buyer, depending on where you're buying and if it's a seller's market or buyer's market. So are there any programs that can help cover the closing cost or possibly a second mortgage as an option?
Yeah, so in Colorado, we definitely have home buyer assistance programs and down payment assistance, help with closing costs. One of the things that you should evaluate carefully, though, is sometimes you have a higher interest rate and higher closing costs with those programs, or they'll roll your closing costs into the loan. So you really want to evaluate, do you really need that assistance, or is it better for you over the life of the loan and the period of time you're going to own the house to just get a conventional or FHA loan?
Got it. Got it. Well, I think that's all.
I had some of those programs, you have to own the house for a certain period of time, or you have to pay back their assistance. And I did have a client who sold. They bought before I was in real estate, and then they sold with me, and they did have to pay that back. And they knew that they would have to pay that back, but that was just something that then, luckily in Colorado, the market was going up, so they had plenty of equity to pay that back without a problem. But if you had to sell and housing prices were going down, you might be in a different situation.
Got it.
And then another thing that Colorado has that I'm not sure if anyone else has, but we have some income restricted properties that you can purchase. And the way those work is your income has to be below a certain level to qualify to purchase the home. But the challenge with these homes is they have an appreciation schedule already set. So your home doesn't appreciate as much as the market appreciates. So your home might be appreciating 3% a year when the rest of the market is appreciating 7% a year. So, and those homes usually have to be owner occupied, cannot be used as rentals. So you want to make sure that you're looking into all of these different programs and making sure they fit for you. So I had a first-time home buyer who approached me about one of those, but she had mentioned that she really wanted to buy her first home and use that as a rental and then buy her second home. So that would have not been a good fit for her overall goals. So just make sure that when you're getting into some of those programs that they really are a fit for what your goals are.
Got it. That makes sense. Well, those are all the questions we have so far, so I'll let you just go ahead and continue.
Excellent. That was a good time for a question break, because now we're going to get into some of the things that you should not do. So the first one is, don't do this on your own. So as I mentioned before, usually the sellers pay for the buyer's agent. So there's really no reason for you not to have your own representation. So you will notice that there are realtors and there are agents. So I'm going to explain the difference between the two. So someone who's a realtor, I'm a realtor. I'm a member of the National Association of Realtors. And we have a code of ethics that has been in place since 1913 and gets updated constantly. And we need to follow the code of ethics on our duties to clients and customers, our duties to the public, and our duties to other realtors. So that is the biggest difference, is we have to follow this code. There are people who are licensed to sell real estate who are not members of the National Association of Realtors, and they cannot say that they're a realtor. So I think that, of course, since I'm a realtor, I think that it's better to have someone who is a realtor and who is following that code of ethics. So that's one thing to ask when you're talking to someone who's a licensed real estate agent is, are you a realtor? So how do you find a realtor? So one way is to talk to your friends and family. I get most of my business through referrals. So it's someone who's used me as their agent recommends me to their friends. So ask them about their experience. You can visit realtor.com and see profiles of the different agents in the area. A great way to find a realtor is to visit open houses. Now, we haven't been able to have those in Colorado for a while. They're just starting up again this weekend, but usually the agents who are at open houses are people who are looking for buyers. They're not necessarily people who are trying to sell that particular home. They want to meet buyers who are looking for a home similar to that home. So I don't do a lot of open houses anymore, but when I have a new listing, I have agents in my office who are looking for buyers who fit that profile, who reach out to me and say, hey, can I hold your listing open? And I'm like, sure, that would be great, because that helps sell my listing as well. And then they have an opportunity to meet buyers. So that's a great way to go and meet and have some conversations with people. Or you can always call me. I'm happy to help you find someone in your state. In fact, I have some friends who are moving to Albuquerque, and they reached out to me and asked if I would help them find a realtor. And I interviewed three different people in the Albuquerque area and found one that I felt like would be the best fit for them. I think one important thing to note is don't just use the listing agent as your agent. So the listing agent on my listing that just went active, that I have like 9 offers on, someone called me and wanted to see it and wanted me to write their offer. Well, in Colorado, we become a transaction broker then. And so we're pretty much saying we're a neutral party just working to get the transaction done. Well, these are my very dear friends selling the house. I'm not going to be able to be a neutral party. I referred her to someone else to write her offer, but that's not always the best situation. You don't always have the best representation if you just call the listing agent. I know one of my family members, before I sold real estate, they used the listing agent because they said they didn't want the agents fighting between themselves over the commission. Well, that commission is already decided and laid out. There's no fighting between agents over the commission during your real estate transaction. So, and during that process, they were getting frustrated because they felt like this agent wasn't listening to them and wasn't advocating for them. And I'm like, she's working for the builder. Like, she has this relationship with this builder where she's selling hundreds of houses for him every year. She's probably not your best representation. And so just keep that in mind. Find your representation. If it's a seller's market, it's definitely, you're going to be so much ahead of the game having your agent on top of things, getting your offer in, rather than trying to call the listing agent. So what should you ask when you're meeting with someone? An important thing is to ask if they work with buyers or sellers, and find someone who works with buyers and likes to work with buyers. So there are agents who definitely prefer to be listing agents and just do listings, which is fine, but you want someone who will enjoy working with you and helping you find a home. When we moved to Colorado, I think that our agent was someone who didn't usually work with buyers, because I would always try to come out from Lincoln to Denver for the weekend to look at houses, and she was always busy. And after getting into real estate, I suddenly realized she wasn't busy. She doesn't show houses on the weekends. She only shows houses Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, which is not realistic for most people. So find someone who works with buyers, ask what hours they work, make sure they're available when you can look at houses. I do most of my showings evenings and weekends. So make sure there's someone who's there when the homes are going on the market and able to show you those homes. Also, what areas of the community does this agent specialize in? So I work in the Denver metro area, and I have people who call me all the time who want to buy a house in Fort Collins or Colorado Springs, and that's just not my area. I don't even have access to the multiple listing service in Colorado Springs. I'm not the best representation for those markets. So I can help. So those people, I have agents I refer them to in Fort Collins and the Springs, but I'm not the person who should be selling a house there. Ask how many properties a year they sell. So if it's someone who sells 100 plus, that sounds really amazing, but you might not be working directly with that agent. You might be working with one of their buyer's agents, which is fine too, because buyer's agents are amazing. That's what they do. They focus on buyers all the time. But make sure you really know who's going to be your main point of contact. Who are you working with? Also, ask about which price points they sell. So there's some agents who just sell luxury properties and they're not, they don't work with first-time home buyers that often. So make sure you know what price point they're at. Last year, my lowest dollar was a $55,000 scrape. So it was this old church that needed to be scraped. It had mold, it had structural issues in Greeley. Now I don't even go to Greeley, but this was a friend of mine who they already had the offer and they paid me to represent them, and it sold for $55,000. My next lowest was a $140,000 condo in the tech center. My highest was $3.35 million. So I have a huge range. I do luxury, but I also do the $150,000 condo first-time home buyer. So make sure that you have someone who is familiar with your price range. Ask if they're a full-time agent. There are a lot of people who do real estate part-time, and especially if it's a seller's market, they're not going to be able to get you into the homes as quickly as someone who's a full-time agent. And then I have this one on here, which is kind of funny. I added here, look at the agent activity on Zillow. And after I put this bullet on here, I went to look at my activity on Zillow and I realized that my buy-side transactions haven't been updated for 2 years. So I quickly did that. But look at what they're selling on Zillow, because that'll tell you where they're selling. It'll show you how many listings versus buyers. But also be aware that Zillow automatically updates your listings that you sold them, but that you have to go, the agent has to go in there and update their buyers. So it's only as good as the time the agent is spending on it. The most important thing though is to find someone who's patient and will get to know your needs and educate you throughout the process. So ask that agent for a buyer consultation, either in their office or via Zoom or at a coffee shop or at wherever you're living now. And if that agent isn't willing to sit down with you and do a buyer consultation, they're probably not going to be the type who will educate you throughout the process. I'm always happy to do buyer consultations, even if someone calls me and says, I'm 2 years out, but I want to know how this process works. I am always happy to sit down with someone and do a buyer consultation just so they know and they can get prepared for purchasing a home. So I think that is one of the best ways you can see if you're with an agent who will be patient and will educate you through the process. So what I do as an agent when I represent my buyers, first is experience. So most people don't buy a home every day or every year. I go through this process 25 to 30 times a year. So I'm constantly going through the home buying process. And that adds value to make sure your transaction is going smooth. Your agent will understand the market conditions. They'll understand pricing and what you need to do to get the house. They'll negotiate on your behalf. And they should be an expert on contracts, because the contract is the way that we can best protect our clients. So we need to know that contract inside and out. So another thing not to do is don't look at homes before you're pre-approved for a mortgage. The mortgage pre-approval narrows your search, and so you'll know which price range to shop in. So many times when I first meet with people, they give me a price point, and they're often at a higher or lower price point than where they thought they were. So, so get that mortgage pre-approval before you even go look at a home. And one piece of advice is when you're talking to your lender, give your lender a monthly payment range that you're comfortable with. Because a lot of times lenders will be like, you can buy a house for $500,000, but you may look at that and be like, oh, I don't want my mortgage to be that high. So make sure whichever lender you're talking to, you're also talking about what you want your payment to be. And before you start shopping for a home is the time to source lenders. So if you want to do research and see what different lenders have to offer, do that before you start shopping, because once you're under contract, the clock is ticking, and it's harder to switch lenders once you're under contract. So here's a list of some of the things that the lender will need. So if you're thinking about buying a home, you might start pulling some of these things together so that you're ready to provide them to the lender. And if you own your own business, you'll have to do things like a profit and loss statement and things like that. So definitely, if you own your business, you want to get started on things a lot sooner before you start looking for homes, because like I own my own business and I don't have a profit and loss statement ready to go. I would have to do a lot of QuickBooks entries to get to that point. So something to keep in mind. Some things not to do when you're buying a home is don't leave your job and start another job. So if you're thinking about switching jobs, get into that job for a while, maybe talk to the lender and say, hey, I'm switching jobs. I'm going from this job to this job. How will that look? How many pay stubs do I need at my new job before I can qualify for a mortgage? Don't buy a new vehicle, apply for a credit card. Pretty much once you're pre-qualified, don't do anything big with your finances without talking to a lender. Even just moving a large deposit from one account to another, talk to the lender before you do that. So another thing is don't look too much into online values. Estimates are not accurate. So for years, our neighbor's house across the street was valued lower than our house. Well, it's just because their house hadn't sold for a while. And so it was pulling much lower than ours, and their house was much nicer than our house. So do not believe those estimates. And an important thing to remember about real estate is really more of a commodity. It is worth what someone is willing to pay for it. So when Apple comes out with a new iPhone, they set the price and we all just go out and pay whatever price Apple is charging for the new iPhone. But real estate is more like gold. It's more like a commodity. What is the market saying it's worth? So you may look at a house and say, that house is overpriced, but the next buyer may say, oh my gosh, I'm desperate for this house. I'm paying $10,000 over. So it's really the buyer who establishes the value of homes. Don't underestimate what you'll need to pay. So while you don't need 20% down, you will need money throughout the transaction. So in Colorado, the very first time you're asked for money is an earnest money deposit. And typically here, that's 1 to 2% of the sale price. So if you're a first-time home buyer buying a $400,000 home, you should plan to have $4,000 to $5,000 ready to go in earnest money that will go to the title company, and they'll deposit that check or the wire transfer, or some title companies now have kind of Venmo for earnest money, and they will hold that for your closing, and that will be a credit to you on the settlement statement when you close. You'll have to pay for inspections. So I only know how much inspections cost in Colorado, but I usually tell people to budget $800 to $1,000 on inspection. Depending on if you're buying a condo, it may be $300, but if you're buying a home that is a Victorian home that's older, it may be more. So budget for that. You'll have to pay for an appraisal and talk to your lender about how that works. You'll have your down payment. You'll also have closing costs. And then you may have some additional expenses. So if you need a survey on the property, if you're buying something that has some land, you might need a land survey. In Colorado, there's always HOA transfer fees. So sit down and talk to your agent about when are the different times they'll have to come up with money throughout this transaction, just so you're ready for it. And then we talked about this a little bit already. Don't wait until you have 20% down. You don't need as much as you think. You can get a loan with 3% down. You can get some home buyer assistance programs where you're putting virtually 0% down. So talk to the lender, talk to your agent, but definitely if you're at having close to 3% ready to go, you're ready to talk to a realtor and start checking into what you can purchase, what you qualify for. So the next one is don't look for the perfect home and don't fall in love. So a unicorn, they don't exist, but I have a lot of buyers who are searching for a unicorn. And I feel like if you can find a home that has 75% of what you want, that's pretty good, and you should move forward with that. Especially if it's your first home, because you can always sell that one and move up. You don't have to live in that home forever. But definitely, I always tell people don't fall in love too, because in the Denver market, if you fall in love with a home, there's probably 10 other buyers who are falling in love with the same home and are writing crazy offers. So you need to go into it and and definitely be more logical about it. Have your list of wants and needs. I sit down with my clients and we talk about must have versus nice to have. I even have a sheet that has different characteristics of homes that they rank how important things are. And if my clients tell me that something's really important, I will remind them of that throughout the transaction. And if I don't think they're searching for a unicorn, I won't let them settle for something that's not. So one of my clients, Sky and Patrick, love to tell the story about how when we first met, they told me that they wanted a true dining room because that's something that they didn't have in their rental house, and they felt like they really wanted a true dining room. And we would look at houses, and it was really competitive, and they were writing lots of offers and not getting them. And they would look at houses and they'd be like, we can probably make this work even though it doesn't have a dining room. And I would just say, no, we are not doing it. That is your number one thing. So if you have a number one thing, like, hold on to that number one thing as long as your agent thinks it's possible, because they are in a house with a dining room now, and they tell all of their friends all the time, we are so glad that LaDawn made us hold out for a house with a dining room because that was something we really wanted. So know what your number one is, but also don't expect to get everything on your list. Another thing is don't be discouraged, be strategic. So it's a discouraging process when you're in multiple offer situations, but you too can get the keys at closing to your new home. It is possible. These clients of mine right here wrote 13 offers before getting this adorable home, and they will tell you that that is the best home that we looked at. So I firmly believe that everyone ends up in the home that they're supposed to have. And while you're writing offers, it seems discouraging, but you will get a house, and you will love whichever house you end up with for whatever reason. So says the person, we moved here from Nebraska, and I would fly out here and look at houses, and I narrowed it down to 2, and my husband picked 1. And I have not liked my house since the day of closing, but I love my neighbors. So even though I haven't liked my house, I'm like, oh, I was supposed to be in this house because I was supposed to meet all these great neighbors. So even if you feel like you're settling on your house, you can still learn to love your neighborhood and your neighbors, and it can still be a fantastic place to live. So what questions do we have?
Well, thank you, LaDawn. That's exactly what I was just going to bring up. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. So just a reminder, if you are joining us on Zoom, please be sure to type your questions into the question and answer box. It's at the very bottom of your screen there. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can leave us a question or a thought in the comment section. And so, LaDawn, while everybody's writing questions, I just want to make sure and thank you for joining us today. You have been an alum that continues to support our university through the Rocky Mountain Alumni Chapter, and really just helping bring more students from the Colorado area to Doane. So I want to let you know that we value your commitment to our school, and thank you for being here to virtually share this information with really alumni from around the world. I know that you work in Colorado. We have some people from Nebraska and some other states that are joining us. So we just really appreciate the volunteerism that you're showing us today.
And I do know realtors from around the world. So if you're buying a house, I know a great one in Turkey, wherever you want to buy, let me know.
LaDawn is a good connecting piece to a lot of different people and places. So
I go to a lot of national conferences where I meet agents from around the world. So
right. We do have one question that came in from Lacey. We're glad Lacey's joining us today. What is the recommended percentage of monthly income to monthly mortgage loan they should be looking at?
Yeah, so that's probably more of a question for a lender than it is for me, because that changes pretty frequently, and they definitely look at different debts in different ways. So I would say I'm probably not the best one to answer that. It used to be that they would say you shouldn't spend more than 40% on your home, but I know that they're looking at that a little bit differently now, depending on what type of debt people have.
Sure. We did have Shannon.
We need to have a mortgage person next.
Yeah, we'll offer them next. We did do this one other time and had a joint alum come on as well and speak about that side of things. So we'll have to remember that for the future. I did have Shannon join us, and she's saying, can you please put up the screen about what to gather, items to maybe have ready to go. So if you're able to go back in your presentation.
I think I have that up now. Can you all see
Oh,
it
good.
now?
Yep, I think so. And Shannon, just so you know, we are going to send this presentation out to you afterwards as well. So you'll be able to see some of those screens and stuff that LaDawn has. But anything more you want to speak to that about what you should have ready to go when you're thinking about buying?
Yeah, I think we recently did a home equity line of credit, so we had to go through this process of gathering everything. And I would say that the more you have that's ready to go right away, the easier your process will be. So gather these things and call the lender and make sure you're getting them uploaded to their system, because we were, like, as I mentioned, I was frantically entering things into QuickBooks. So that's usually not the best experience for you. So whatever you can gather ahead of time so you're ready to upload it to the lender system is great.
Okay, and we had another question come through on chat. If a person has enough money for the down payment, but not all the closing costs, is it possible to offer more of an asking price so the seller pays the closing costs? That way the closing costs are covered?
Yes, it is definitely possible to do that. You see that more in buyers markets than sellers markets. But if that's the situation you're in, you just need to be more strategic. So I have had people this year who have gotten closing costs, but we haven't gone out and looked at the homes the first weekend they go on the market. We wait and see what's left over after the weekend, and then we would go look at those homes because they had a better chance of getting those closing costs covered in that type of situation. So I had buyers who just closed last month who we very strategically would watch. We wouldn't look at anything that was brand new. We'd look at the things that maybe started out overpriced that people have overlooked for some reason, and we did get them closing costs. And that's exactly what they did. We offered a little bit more. We offered like $4,000 more and asked for $4,000 in closing costs. So it was an even for the seller.
Right, makes sense. If a home buyer thinks it might be more of a short-term purchase than a long-term, how should that impact their decision and their thought process?
Yeah, so I think, like in Colorado, if people are going to be in the home for less than 2 years, a lot of times once you pay all of the closing fees, it's not like you're making a lot of money. And we're a market that's been going up pretty high, pretty quickly. Definitely if it's someone who's here who's going to be in it only a couple of years, I usually tell them buy a single family home, not a townhome or a condo, because single family homes are usually easier to sell than condos and townhomes. And you just want to look at what your market is like. If your market is going up significantly, it may make sense to buy it and live in it for a year. I had some clients who relocated here for the military for a year and a half, and they bought a home and they bought one that needed to be updated, and they did a lot of the sweat equity themselves and they came out great on it. So it just depends on your situation and how much sweat equity you're willing to do and what the market is like in your area. But that's definitely a good thing to think about if you're not going to be there long term.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we have covered all of our questions, but LaDawn, is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we wrapped up?
I don't think so. Just if you know of people who are buying or selling in the Denver metro area, I would love to work with them. So feel free to give them my contact info. And if you have questions, feel free to give me a call. I'm always happy to connect you with agents and realtors in your metro areas. So just let me know.
That's great. We can definitely.
You can Google me and my phone number is everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And it's in the presentation, and we'll be sending that presentation out to folks too. So, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate you being here. This webinar, like I mentioned, has been recorded, and we'll be sharing that online soon. So we'll email it to you. It'll be on our website. It'll be on Facebook, YouTube. It's all over the place. And then we'll also share LaDawn's contact information. To see a new lineup of webinars, go to doane.edu/lifelongtigers. And our next webinar will take place on Thursday, July 23rd at 12 p.m. Central. And will feature AJ Waters from the class of 2005 as he takes kind of a different spin on networking. And it's called Guilty by Association in a Good Way. So
Love it.
I know it's going to be good. So thank you again for everybody joining us. And we will see you next time. And go Doane.
Thanks, Anne.
Bye.
Bye.